Imagine looking at a 100-year-old missing persons report in South Korea and seeing your exact name, your exact face, and your exact description on the dusty page. What if the man who holds you like you're his entire world is actually the one keeping you trapped in a century-old nightmare? How do you walk away from the only man who has ever truly loved you, when you realize his love is the very cage keeping you trapped? Hey, if this is your first time here, do me a favor real quick. Hit that subscribe button because this channel is serving you full stories like this every week. And drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. I want to know if you're tuning in from Atlanta, Seoul, London. Wherever you are, let me know. Now let's get back to this story because things are about to get complicated. The lighthouse was not supposed to be beautiful. That was the first thing Zola thought when she stepped off the ferry and saw it, sitting high on the edge of the Taejongdi cliffs in Busan, South Korea, like something that had been there long before anyone thought to build a city around it. Old, worn. The kind of structure that made you feel small just by looking at it. The stone was dark from years of sea, wind and rain, and the light at the top had not worked in decades. But still, there was something about it that pulled at her chest in a way she could not explain. She was not supposed to feel things like that. She was an architect. She dealt in measurements and blueprints and structural assessments. Not feelings. Not pulls. But Busousan had a way of doing that, making you feel things you were not prepared for. Zola adjusted the strap of her bag on her shoulder and looked around the small port. She was the only person who had gotten off the ferry with a rolling suitcase and a tube of blueprints tucked under one arm. Everyone else looked like they belonged here. She did not. She was tall, full-figured, dark-skinned, with natural hair she had pinned up because the sea wind was already trying to take it somewhere. She had flown from Atlanta, Georgia, changed flights in Seoul, and taken a ferry to this specific part of Busan's coastline because her firm had won a restoration contract for the lighthouse. 6 weeks. That was all she was supposed to need. 6 weeks and then back home. She did not plan to stay longer than that. She had just started walking toward the small guest house her firm had booked for her when she heard someone say, in very flat, very unbothered English, "You should leave before dark." She stopped. There was a man sitting on a low stone wall near the edge of the dock. He had a fishing line dropped into the water below him and he was not looking at her. He was looking at the water. He was Korean, maybe early 40s, lean but broad-shouldered, with dark hair that the wind kept pushing across his forehead. He was wearing a worn gray jacket and rubber boots, and he looked like he had been sitting on that wall for several hours at least. Maybe several years. "Excuse me," Zola said. "The lighthouse," he said, still not looking at her. "You're going there, right? The new architect." He said architect the way someone says a word they have heard but do not fully respect. "You should leave before dark." "I just got here," she said. "I know," he said. He finally looked at her. His eyes were dark and steady, the kind that did not move around a lot. "That's why I'm telling you now. Before you unpack." Zola stared at him for a second. Then she almost laughed. "Almost. I appreciate the welcome. Really. Very warm." She picked up her suitcase and kept walking. She heard him say quietly behind her, "Don't say I didn't warn you." His name was Seon-oh. She found that out from the woman who ran the guest house, a small round lady named Mrs. Beck who spoke broken English and made up for it with very expressive hand gestures. "Seon-oh," Mrs. Beck said, nodding slowly when Zola described the man on the dock. "Yes. He fish every day. Every day, same wall, same time. He live on the cliffside. Alone." She paused and tilted her head. "He talked to you?" "He told me to leave," Zola said. Mrs. Beck's eyebrows went up. "He talked to you." She said it like it was significant. Like that meant something. "He don't talk to most people." Zola did not think much about it that night. She was tired. She unpacked, ate the soup Mrs. Beck left outside her door, and went to sleep with the sound of the sea pressing against the windows. But she thought about his eyes. Just briefly. Before she fell asleep. She went to the lighthouse the next morning alone, the way she always worked in the beginning, walking the space before she touched anything. The path up to Taejongdi's cliffs was steep and the wind coming off the Korea Strait was sharp and cold even in the morning. But when she got to the lighthouse and pushed open the old iron door and stepped inside, she stopped. It was quiet in a way that felt deliberate. Like the building was holding its breath. She shook that thought off immediately. Buildings did not hold their breath. She took out her notebook and started walking the ground floor, checking the walls, the floors, the staircase that spiraled up to the lamp room. Some of the steps were cracked. The iron railing was rusted in 3 places. The lamp mechanism at the top was completely seized. There was a lot of work to do. She was on the second landing making notes when the light flickered. She looked up. There were no lights on. The electricity to the lighthouse had been cut off years ago and the restoration team had not connected it yet. But something had flickered. At the top of the tower. Like a flash of something passing the narrow window. She stood still for a moment. Then she wrote it down in her notebook. Asterisk light anomaly, second landing, 9:47 a.m. Possible reflection from sea surface. Asterisk. She was an architect. Everything had an explanation. She went back to work. Seon-oh showed up at the lighthouse 3 days later. Not invited. Not announced. He just appeared at the iron door one afternoon while Zola was measuring the outer wall, and he stood there with his hands in his jacket pockets watching her work. "You're still here," he said. "Yep," she said, not looking up from her measuring tape. He was quiet for a while. She could feel him standing there, which was annoying because she did not normally feel people standing places. "The wall on the north side," he finally said. "The stone under the waterline mark. It's not just cracked. It's hollow. Someone dug behind it once and filled it back in with the wrong material." She stopped. Looked up. "How do you know that?" He shrugged. "I grew up here." She looked at him for a long second. Then she walked to the north wall and knocked on the stone with her knuckle in 3 different places. The third place sounded different. Duller. Like knocking on a door that had nothing behind it. She turned around. He was almost smiling. Not quite. But almost. "Fine," she said. "Thank you." "You're welcome," he said. And he left. Started like that. Small things. He would show up, say something useful, leave. She would use the information and not thank him properly and he would not seem to care. By the second week he was showing up every day. By the third week he was staying longer. He brought her coffee once, strong Korean coffee in a small paper cup, and set it on the stone wall next to her without saying anything. She drank it without saying anything either. But one afternoon she looked up from her blueprints and said, "Why did you tell me to leave the first day?" He did not answer immediately. He was sitting on the window ledge of the lighthouse's ground floor, looking out at the sea. The light was doing that thing it does in Busousan in the late afternoon, turning everything gold and heavy. "Because," he said slowly, "this place has a history." "What kind of history?" He hesitated. "The kind that doesn't stay in the past." He waited for more. He did not give her more. So she went back to her blueprints. But she thought about it all evening. The haunting melody started on a Thursday. She was alone in the lighthouse working late when she heard it, faint, coming from somewhere above her. A soft sound like someone humming. Low and slow and sad, the kind of melody that felt like it was remembering something. She went up the stairs to the lamp room. Nothing there. She went back down. The sound was gone. He called Seon-oh. She had his number by then. Mrs. Beck had given it to her for safety reasons, she said. "I heard something in the lighthouse," Zola said when he picked up. "What kind of something?" he said. He sounded awake even though it was past 10 at night. "Like someone humming. Up in the lamp room, but when I got there nothing was there." Silence on his end. Then, "Lock the door and go back to the guest house." Seon-oh. Zola. He said her name like it was something he had been careful not to say before. "Please." She locked the door. She went back to the guest house. But she did not sleep. 2 days later he took her to Gwangali Beach. He did not expect it. He just showed up at the guest house on a Saturday morning and said, "You've been working every day since you got here. Come on." And something about the way he said it, not a question, not a demand, just a statement like it was obvious, made her put down her coffee and go. Gwangali was everything Taejongdi was not. Bright, loud, full of people and color and the smell of street food and the famous Gwangan Bridge stretching wide across the water. They walked the beach for a long time without talking much. He bought her tteokbokki from a street cart and watched her face when she took the first bite. "Too spicy?" he asked. "No," she said, fanning her mouth. "It's perfect." Her eyes were watering. He laughed. It was the first time she had heard him laugh. It was quiet and real and it changed his whole face. He thought, maybe this is a problem. After that, something shifted between them. He started teaching her words in Korean. Not the tourist words, the real ones. The ones people actually say. She started teaching him things about architecture that she loved. The way a building could tell you its whole history if you knew how to listen to it. They ate together most evenings. He took her to Jigalki Market and bought her a warm jacket because the sea wind had been getting colder. She wore it the next day over her work clothes and he did not comment on it, but she saw him notice. One evening, sitting outside the guest house with the sea in the distance and Mrs. Beck's small garden lights flickering around them, Seon-oh said quietly, "I haven't talked this much to anyone in a long time." "How long?" she asked. He thought about it. "Maybe 8 years." She looked at him. "What happened 8 years ago?" He looked at the sea. "I lost something," he said. "And I came here to be where I lost it." She did not push. But she reached over and put her hand over his, just for a moment, just briefly. And he turned his hand over and held hers. That was all. But it was everything. They got married on a quiet morning 6 weeks later, in a small civil ceremony at the Busousan City Hall, with Mrs. Beck as the witness and a bouquet of yellow flowers Zola had picked from the cliffside path. Her firm had extended her contract. She had told them she needed more time with the restoration. But the truth, and she knew it was the truth, was that she was not ready to leave Seon-oh. He had looked at her that morning in the city hall, in a white shirt he had pressed carefully, and said, "You know I'm not easy to be with, right?" "I know," she said. "And you're staying anyway?" "I'm staying anyway," she said. He nodded slowly. Like he was filing that away somewhere important. Like he was going to hold on to it. Mrs. Beck cried through the whole thing and kept apologizing for crying. They went back to the lighthouse that afternoon. Their lighthouse now, the one Zola was rebuilding, and stood at the top in the lamp room where the old light mechanism was still seized and rusted, and looked out at the Korea Strait together. The water was dark and wide and endless. "It's beautiful," Zola said. "Yeah," Seon-oh said. But he was looking at her. "Hey, if you're already loving this story, do me a favor real quick. Hit that subscribe button because this channel is serving you full stories like this every week. And drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. I want to know if you're tuning in from Atlanta, Seoul, London. Wherever you are, let me know. Now let's get back to this story because things are about to get complicated. The storm came on a Tuesday. It rolled in from the Korea Strait like it had been planning it for weeks. Dark clouds stacking up on the horizon in the morning. And by afternoon the wind was so strong that the ferry service suspended all trips in and out of the Taejongdi area. The guest house windows rattled. The sea turned the color of iron. Mrs. Beck went around the building taping plastic over the lower windows and muttering things in Korean that did not sound like prayers. Zola and Seon-oh were both at the lighthouse when it hit. They had gone up early that morning to check on some new beams she had ordered installed on the third landing. The installation team had left just before the sky turned dark, and by the time Zola and Seon-oh realized how bad it was getting, the path down the cliff was already dangerous. Wet stone, no railing on the outer edge, wind pushing sideways. Seon-oh looked at the path, looked at the sky, looked at Zola. "We waited out here," he said. "Here." She looked around the lighthouse. There was a small ground floor room they had set up as a workspace. A table, 2 chairs, a portable heater she used during cold mornings, some emergency supplies she kept in a box by the door because her father had always told her to be prepared. "Here," he said. Like it was settled. So they stayed. The first hour was fine. She made notes. He sat by the small window and watched the storm the way he watched the sea when he fished. Patient, like the weather was something you had a relationship with, not something that happened to you. The heater kept the room warm enough. The wind screamed outside, but the old lighthouse walls barely moved. They had been standing for over 100 years. They were not going anywhere tonight. "You're not scared," she said, watching him. "Of the storm?" He shook his head slightly. "No." "Of anything?" she asked. He was half joking. But only half. He was quiet for a moment. "A few things," he said. He did not list them. She pulled her chair closer to the heater and tucked her feet under her. "Tell me about the history," she said. "The one you mentioned. The kind that doesn't stay in the past." He looked at her. "We're stuck here," she said. "And I've been waiting. So, talk." He was quiet for so long she thought he was going to say no. Then he leaned back in his chair and looked at the ceiling and started talking. "There was a woman," he said. "A long time ago. Before the lighthouse was abandoned. She came here from somewhere else, not Korean. Nobody was sure exactly where she was from, but she was different, you know? Stood out. She was hired to do work on the building, some kind of documentation, historical records, something like that. He paused. She and the lighthouse keeper fell in love. Quickly. The kind of fast that makes people around you nervous. What happened to them? Zola asked. He hesitated. She disappeared, he said. One night. During a storm, actually. He glanced at the window. They found her things in the lamp room. Her coat. Her notebook. The door was locked from the inside. But she was gone. Zola felt something move through her. Not fear exactly. Something more like recognition. Which made no sense. And the lighthouse keeper? He stayed, Seon-oh said. Kept the light going for years after. People said he was waiting for her to come back. He stopped. Eventually he disappeared too. The wind hit the building hard enough to make the walls groan. The heater flickered. How do you know all this? Zola asked. He looked at his hands. My grandmother told me. She grew up near here. Said the lighthouse was where love went to get stuck. That's a dark way to put it, Zola said. She was a dark woman, he said. But there was something soft in the way he said it. Like he had loved her very much. After that, the storm kept them talking through things they had not talked about before. Real things. The kind that come out when you are stuck somewhere and the wind is loud enough that the words feel safer. Seon-oh told her about the years before Busousan. He was careful about it. The way someone is careful when they are telling a truth that has edges. He had been in Seoul. He had been involved in things he was not proud of. Business he called it, but the way he said business made the word feel like it was wearing a disguise. He had come to Busan 8 years ago, he said, to get away from all of it. To be nobody. To fish and be quiet and stop being the person he had been. What kind of business? Zola asked. Careful. Not pushing. Just asking. He looked at her for a long moment. The kind where people don't ask questions, he said. And if they do, something bad happens. She held his gaze. Are you still in it? No, he said. And then, mostly no. She raised an eyebrow. He sighed. It's complicated to leave completely. Like you can stop doing the work. But the people don't forget you existed. She nodded slowly. He filed that away. She did not ask more that night. But she thought about it. They slept in the workroom that night. She took the folded drop cloth she used to cover her equipment and made a kind of mat on the floor, and he sat in the chair with his jacket pulled up, and at some point in the middle of the night she woke up and he was awake too, just sitting there in the dark, watching the door. Seon-oh, she said quietly. Go back to sleep, he said. Why are you watching the door? He did not answer right away. Then, old habit, he said. She looked at him. In the dark, with the storm still going outside, his face was hard to read. But his hands were loose in his lap. Not tense. Just alert. Like a man who had spent years listening for things other people didn't hear. You don't have to protect me, she said. I know, he said. Go to sleep, Zola. She went back to sleep. But she kept thinking about the word mostly. Mostly no. The next morning the storm had pulled back enough to walk, and they went down the cliff path together, him in front with one hand back for her to hold on the steeper sections. At the bottom, Mrs. Beck was standing outside the guest house with 2 bowls of hot juk, rice porridge, and the expression of a woman who had been worried all night and was furious about it. You stay in lighthouse all night, she said. It was fine, Zola said. The lighthouse is not fine, Mrs. Beck said and pointed at both of them like they were children. Eat. They ate on the steps because Mrs. Beck would not let them inside until they took off their wet shoes. Seon-oh ate his juk in about 4 minutes. Zola ate hers slowly, watching him. He was back to his quiet self in the daylight. The man who had talked through the night felt like a different version of him. Realer, maybe. Or maybe just more available. He wondered which one was the real Ryu Seon-oh. Probably both. People were usually both. After that she started noticing things. It was not that Seon-oh did anything wrong exactly. He was still there every day. He still brought her coffee. He still made her laugh with the dry way he said things. He had started leaving small things at the guest house for her. Once a book of Korean poetry with certain pages folded down. Once a pair of warm socks because he had noticed her complaining about the cold floor. Once a small carved wooden fish he left on her windowsill without any note or explanation. But there were gaps. Moments where he would get a phone call and walk far away to take it, far enough that she could not hear even the tone of his voice. Moments where he would look at the lighthouse with an expression she could not name. Not quite guilt, not quite fear, but something in between. Moments where she would ask him a simple question and he would pause just a half-second too long before answering. She told herself it was nothing. He had already told her his past was complicated. She had already decided she could live with complicated. But the thing about gaps, the thing about half-second pauses, is that once you start noticing them you cannot stop. One afternoon she went to the lighthouse alone, earlier than usual. She was going to check on the north wall repair. The hollow section Seon-oh had pointed out to her in the very beginning. The contractors had opened it up and filled it properly, but she wanted to see the finished work. Behind the old fill material, when they had opened it, the contractors had found something strange. She had seen the photos they sent her. She had meant to look closer at the time but had gotten pulled into other work. Now she stood in front of the repaired wall and thought about what had been inside it. A small tin box. Rusted shut. Her contractor had handed it to her and she had put it in her work bag and forgotten about it in all the storm chaos. She found it that evening at the bottom of her work bag. She had to use a chisel to get the lid open. Inside was a small folded piece of paper, so old it felt like fabric, and when she opened it carefully, the writing on it was in two languages, Korean on one side and English on the other. The English side said, "She always comes back. And he is always waiting. It is not love. It is a trap." Zola read it 3 times. Then she looked up at the lamp room above her, where the old light mechanism still sat, seized and cold and silent. And the melody started again. "Okay, listen. If this story has got you on the edge of your seat right now, you need to subscribe to this channel because we do not do boring around here. Hit that subscribe button and leave a comment telling me where you're watching this from. I see every single one. Now hold on tight because this is where everything you thought you knew gets turned completely upside down." She did not tell Seon-oh about the note right away. She told herself it was because she wanted to understand it first. That was probably true. But it was also probably true that something small and quiet in the back of her mind was starting to ask questions about Seon-oh that she was not fully ready to ask out loud. She photographed the note. She put the tin box in her bag. She went back to the guest house and sat at the small desk in her room with her laptop and started searching. She started with the lighthouse records. Her firm had given her access to historical documentation as part of the restoration project. Old building reports, maintenance logs, coastal authority records going back to the early 1900s. She had skimmed them at the beginning for structural information and not gone deeper. Now she went deeper. It took her 2 hours to find it. A report from 1987. A disappearance. A woman, foreign, the record said, not Korean, who had been working at the Taejongdi lighthouse on a documentation project. She had been reported missing after a storm. Her belongings were found in the lamp room. The door had been locked from the inside. No body was ever recovered. Zola's eyes moved to the name on the report. She read it once. She read it again. The name on the 1987 missing persons record was Zola. Not a similar name. Not a name that rhymed with hers or shared some letters. Her name. Exactly. Zola. With the same unusual spelling. And below the name in the physical description column, tall, dark-skinned, natural hair, full figure. Zola pushed back from the desk so fast her chair hit the wall behind her. She stood up. She sat back down. She picked up her phone and put it back down. She looked at the record on her screen until the words started to feel like they were moving. This was a coincidence. It had to be a coincidence. Names repeated. Physical descriptions were general. Tall, dark-skinned, natural hair. That described millions of women. It was a coincidence, and she was a logical, practical architect who dealt in facts and measurements. And she was not going to sit in a small room in Busousan and let an old record make her panic. She went to bed. She did not sleep. By morning she had found 3 more records. 1987 was not the only time. There was a reference in a 1962 Coastal Authority note to a foreign woman who had worked at the lighthouse and vanished during a storm. The physical description was almost identical. The name in the 1962 record was different. But barely. Something that could be an older spelling or a translation error of the same name. And there was a 1934 missionary journal she found in a digitized historical archive. A passage about a lighthouse keeper on the Taejongdi coast who had fallen in love with a foreign woman who disappeared without explanation. The missionary who wrote the journal had been troubled by it. He wrote, "The keeper seems unsurprised by her absence. Almost as though he expected it. 3 instances. Spanning decades. A foreign woman. This lighthouse. A disappearance. And a man who was always there. Always waiting." Zola sat with that for a long time. Then she thought about Seon-oh saying, "I came here to be where I lost it." She thought about the note in the tin box, "He is always waiting. It is not love. It is a trap." She thought about the way he had shown up on her very first day and told her to leave. She had always read that as a warning given out of care. But what if it was something else? What if it was the kind of warning that was more like a formality? The kind you give so that later you can say you warned them? Her hands were cold. She was probably overreacting. He was definitely maybe overreacting. But still. She went to the lighthouse that morning and she watched Seon-oh the way she had never let herself watch him before. Careful. Measuring. The way she measured walls. He was helping her document the lamp room mechanism. Sketching the parts so the restoration team would know what to order. He was good at it, actually. His hands were steady and his eye for detail was sharp. She had always appreciated that about him. Now she watched those steady hands and thought about what else they might be good at. He looked up and caught her watching. "What?" he said. "Nothing," she said. "Just thinking." "About the restoration?" "About everything," she said. He held her gaze for a moment. Something moved across his face, not guilt, not fear, but something cautious. Careful. Like a man who knew a conversation was coming and was deciding how to handle it. "Zola," he said slowly. "Not now," she said. "Later." He nodded. He went back to his sketching. But his hand was not as steady after that. That afternoon she went to the Busousan Metropolitan Library in the Sosong district. She took the subway, which she had not done alone before, and she was grateful for the noise and the ordinary people and the feeling of being somewhere that had nothing to do with lighthouses or storms or old records with her name on them. She found a librarian who spoke enough English to help her navigate the local history archive. She spent 4 hours in there. She came out with photographs of 2 documents she had not found online. The first was a handwritten ledger from the lighthouse keeper's personal records, dated 1987. Most of it was in Korean, but one page had English notes. The keeper writing to himself apparently in the language she had used. The relevant line was, "She is here again. Same face. Same way of standing at the north wall. I told her to leave. She never leaves. They never leave. They never leave. They." Plural. Like he had seen this more than once. The second document was a photograph. Black and white, dated 1962. A woman standing at the base of the Taejongdi lighthouse, looking up at the lamp room. The photograph was grainy and old, but the woman in it was tall and full-figured and her hair was natural and unstraightened and she was dark-skinned and she was standing with one hand on the north wall. The way Zola stood at the north wall every single morning. Zola left the library and stood outside on the street in the cold Busan afternoon and just breathed for a while. He was not panicking. He was processing. There was a difference. But it was a very small difference right now. He called Seon-oh that evening. "I need you to tell me everything," she said. "Not the version you've been giving me. Everything." A long silence. Then, "Where are you?" "Guest house," she said. "Come here." He came. He sat across from her at the small table in the guest house common room and she put her phone on the table with the photographs of the documents pulled up. And she put the tin box next to the phone and she looked at him and waited. He looked at the documents. He looked at the tin box. He did not look surprised. That was the thing, he did not look surprised at all. He looked like a man who had just heard the timer go off on something he had been expecting. "How long have you known?" she asked. He hesitated. "Known what exactly?" "Don't," she said. Flat. Quiet. "Don't do that. I have 3 separate historical records with my name and my description attached to this lighthouse over the last 100 years. I have a note from inside your wall that says this is a trap. And you are sitting there looking like none of this is news to you. So don't ask me known what." He was quiet for a long time. The kind of quiet that is not empty, the kind that is full of things being decided. Finally he said, "I've been waiting for you." She stared at him. "Not you specifically," he said quickly. "I mean yes you. But I didn't know it would be you. I just knew someone would come. Someone always comes." "What does that mean?" she said. Very still. Very careful. He put his hands flat on the table. My family has been connected to that lighthouse for generations, he said. The lighthouse keeper in 1987, that was my uncle. The one in 1962, that was my grandfather's brother. And the one before that, he stopped. It goes back far. Further than the records you found. And the women? Zola said. He closed his eyes for just a second. They always come, he said quietly. A foreign woman. Always the same, the way she looks, the way she works, the way she stands. She comes to the lighthouse. She falls. He stopped. She gets connected to the man there. And then during a storm she disappears. The melody. Faint. Above them. From nowhere. Zola did not move. And you knew this before I arrived. Yes, he said. And you married me anyway, she said. Zola. Answer the question, Seon-oh. He looked at her. His eyes were the steadiest she had ever seen them. But they were also, she realized, the saddest. I married you, he said slowly, because you were real and he stopped. Started again. Because I thought maybe this time it would be different. Because I wanted it to be different. Different how, she said. Different ending, he said. Very quiet. She looked at him for a long time. She thought about the yellow flowers at their wedding. The wooden fish on her windowsill. The warm jacket at Jigaoki Market. The way he said her name the first time. Careful, like something he had been saving. And she thought about they never leave in the lighthouse keeper's handwriting. What happens to them, she said. The women. What actually happens to them during the storm? He did not answer. Arwe, she said. What happens to them? He looked at the table. And in the long, terrible silence that followed, Zola understood that the answer was not something she was going to like. Not even a little. Listen, I know you are not okay right now, and that is exactly where I need you to be. Subscribe to this channel right now because the finale of this story is something you will be talking about for weeks. Drop your location in the comments. Are you watching from Korea? The US? I see you. Now let's finish this. She did not run. That was the thing about Zola, she had never been a runner. Not from hard buildings, not from difficult clients, not from anything. She sat with the silence Seon-oh had given her instead of an answer, and she let it sit, and then she stood up and said, I'm going to the lighthouse. Zola, don't. I'm not asking, she said. He followed her. Of course he followed her. He always followed her. The path up to Taejongdi was dark. She had her flashlight and she knew every stone by now. She had walked this path 100 times in the weeks she had been here. Behind her she could hear Seon-oh's footsteps. He was not trying to stop her. He was just following. Like he always did. Like he was supposed to. That thought made something cold move through her. Like he was supposed to. She pushed the lighthouse door open and went in. The melody was louder tonight. She could hear it clearly now. Not from above, not from the lamp room, but from everywhere, like the walls themselves were producing it. Slow set. The same sequence of notes, repeating. She went up the stairs without stopping. First landing. Second landing. Third. Her hand on the iron railing that she had documented and measured and planned to have replaced. She knew every rust spot on this railing. She had built a relationship with this building. She had thought she was restoring it. The lamp room door was open. She stepped in. The old light mechanism was there, seized and cold as always. The windows all around showed the dark sea and the scattered lights of Busousan in the distance. The wind outside was picking up again. Another storm or the tail end of the last one, she couldn't tell. And on the floor of the lamp room in the corner she had swept out herself 3 weeks ago, there was a coat. And a notebook. Not hers. Old. The kind of old that means decades, not years. He picked up the notebook. Her hands were steady. She was an architect. She did not shake. She opened it. The handwriting inside was hers. Not similar to hers. Not resembling hers. Hers. The exact way she formed her letters, the way she crossed her sevens, the way she wrote the letter Z, which was, after all, the first letter of her name. She turned to the last page that had writing on it. It said, I remember now. I remember everything. I came back and I married him and I thought this time it would be different, and it is not different. It is never different. He waits and I come and I love him, and then the storm comes and I... The writing stopped. Mid-sentence. Zola stood in the lamp room of the Taejongdi lighthouse in Busan, South Korea, holding a notebook written in her handwriting, and she understood. She was not restoring the lighthouse. She had been the woman who disappeared. Over and over. Coming back each time without her memories, drawn to the same building, falling for the same man, reaching the same night, the same storm, the same lamp room, and then gone. Reset. Sent back to the beginning. The lighthouse was not cursed. He was. Seon-oh appeared in the doorway of the lamp room. He looked at the notebook in her hands. He looked at her face. And for the first time since she had known him, he looked like something had broken open inside him. Not guilt. Not quite. More like grief. The kind of grief that has been carried for so long it has become part of the body. You remember, he said. It was not a question. All of it, she said. And it was true. It was coming in now, fast and total, like a dam giving way. Every loop. Every return. Every time she had stood in this room with this same feeling of the walls closing in. Every time she had looked at his face and loved him, and then, "You did this," she said. He did not deny it. Not the way you think," he said. He stepped into the room. "I didn't mean for it to start. The first time my ancestor, he made a choice. A bad choice. And it locked her here. Locked us here. Because it's not just you in the cycle, Zola. I'm in it too. I come back too. I wait here every time knowing what's coming and not being able to stop it. You could have told me," she said. "This time. You could have told me everything from the beginning." "I tried," he said, and his voice cracked just slightly. "Every time I try. And every time I can't get the words out before the storm." "Before you let the storm take me," she said. "I don't let it. You don't stop it," she said. And that landed between them like a stone into still water. Because that was the truth and they both knew it. He had the power to break the cycle. He had always had the power. It was buried in the same place the curse was buried. In the choice his ancestor had made, in the thing the lighthouse keeper had done that the 1934 missionary had been too polite to write down directly. He had never chosen to use it. Because using it meant losing her. Even a looping, cycling, never quite real version of her. She looked at him and she felt, not hate. She had thought maybe standing in this room with the truth arriving all at once, that she would feel hate. But it was not hate. It was something sadder than that. It was love looking at its own shadow and realizing the shadow had always been there. "I love you," he said. Quietly. "I know that doesn't fix anything. I know what I am and what my family did and what I've let happen. But I need you to know that every time, every single time, I have loved you. Really. It's not a performance. It's the only real thing I have." She believed him. That was the hardest part. She believed him. The takbaki on the beach and the wooden fish on the windowsill and the way he said her name the very first time. She believed all of it. It was real and it was also a cage, and both of those things were true at the same time. "Then help me end it," she said. He stared at her. "Zola. You said your ancestor made a choice," she said. "Choices can be unmade. There is always a structural solution. You find the original break and you fix it from there." She almost smiled, just barely. "I'm an architect, Seon-oh. I know how to fix things that have been broken for a long time." He was very still. "Tell me what your ancestor did," she said. "Tell me exactly. All of it. The thing the missionary wouldn't write. The thing that started the loop." He told her. It took a long time. The storm outside built while he talked, the wind finding the gaps in the old lamp room windows, the melody rising and falling underneath his voice. She listened. She did not interrupt. She was the way she was when she walked a new building for the first time. Fully present, taking everything in, storing it away for use. When he finished, she was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Give me your hand." He held out his hand. He took it. She turned it over. On his palm, just below the thumb, there was a small scar she had noticed before and never asked about. She had assumed it was from fishing. "This is where it is," she said. Not a question. He nodded. Very slow. "Your ancestor bound it to the family line," she said. "Which means it can be unbound the same way. By the person in the line choosing to release it. Freely. Without trying to hold on to what it gives them. What it gives me," he said, "is you. Every time." "I know," she said. "I know that's what it costs." He looked at her. The storm was at the windows now. The melody was everywhere. The light in the lamp room, the light that had not worked in decades, was starting to flicker. Warm and gold and slow. If I release it, he said, you leave. Really leave. Not the loop, actually leave. And I don't. He stopped. I don't come back either. It ends. All of it. Yes, she said. And we don't. He stopped again. No, she said gently. We don't. He looked at her for a very long time. She let him look. She owed him that much. She owed herself that much too, to stand here and feel the full weight of what this was. A love that was real. A cage that was real. And a choice that could only go one way if it was going to be honest. You were the best part, he said finally. His voice was very quiet. Every time. Even when you were scared of me. Even when you were angry. You were always the best part of every loop. I know, she said. You were the best part of mine too. She paused. That's why I need you to let me go. The storm hit the lighthouse like a held breath finally released. The light blazed, fully, completely for the first time in decades, the old lamp room flooding with gold. Seon-oh closed his eyes. And he let her go. The melody stopped. The storm did not stop. Storms do not stop on cue, they are not so polite. But something shifted in the air, something fundamental, like a note that had been held too long finally resolving. The lamp room was warm with the light. The notebook on the floor, her handwriting, her memories, all those looping years, turned to dust quietly without drama, without ceremony. Just gone. Zola stood in the lamp room alone. She looked at her hands. They were her hands. She was here. He was real. She was not looping back to a ferry dock or a guest house or a first morning. She was standing in the lamp room of the Taejongdi lighthouse in Busousan, South Korea, at the end of something that had lasted longer than it should have, and she was free. She looked at where Seon-oh had been standing. He was not there. She did not know exactly what that meant for him. Whether he was somewhere else now, released into something ordinary and quiet, or whether he was simply gone the way the notebook was gone. He hoped genuinely that it was the first one. She hoped he was somewhere getting to be nobody, fishing from a low stone wall somewhere, not waiting for anyone, just watching the water because he liked the water. She thought he deserved that. Even after everything. Maybe especially after everything. He went down the stairs. She went down the cliff path. She walked through the small streets of the Taejongdi neighborhood as the storm pulled back and the sky went from iron to gray to the particular pale gold that Busan mornings do when they are deciding to be beautiful. Mrs. Beck was outside the guest house sweeping the step. "Egu," Mrs. Beck said when she saw Zola. "You look like you walk through whole ocean." "Something like that," Zola said. Mrs. Beck looked behind her. "Seon-oh," she said. Zola was quiet for a moment. "He's gone," she said. Mrs. Beck looked at her. Not with surprise. With that particular old woman understanding that comes from having lived long enough to know that some things do not need explaining. She just nodded slowly and held the guest house door open. "Come eat," she said. "I make juk." She finished the restoration. She stayed the full remaining weeks of her extended contract and she finished the work she had come to do. She replaced the railing on the staircase. She repaired the north wall properly. She restored the lamp mechanism. It had been easier than expected once she understood it, once she stopped being afraid to really look at it. He even got the light working. Not the old curse cycling flicker. A real, steady light. The kind ships could actually use. On the last evening before she flew back to Atlanta, she went up to the lamp room one more time. She stood at the window and looked out at the Korea Strait. The water was dark and wide and endless and beautiful, the way it had always been. She thought about Seon-oh saying you were the best part. She thought about yellow flowers and wooden fish and warm socks left outside a door. She thought about love that is real and a cage at the same time, and how sometimes the most loving thing anyone can do is open the door. Then she turned away from the window and went down the stairs and did not look back. That was important, the not looking back. It was the thing none of the previous versions of her had managed to do. She managed it. At Gimhae International Airport the next morning, waiting for her flight to Seoul and then Atlanta, she bought a postcard of the Busan coastline from a small airport shop. She wrote on the back of it, just a few words to no one in particular, or maybe to every version of herself that had stood in that lamp room and not known how to leave. She wrote, "The ending is not always what the story looked like it was building toward. Sometimes the ending is just you walking out free into the ordinary world. And that is enough. That is more than enough." He kept the postcard. She did not mail it. She put it in her bag next to her blueprints and her measuring tape and her notebook, and she walked to her gate and she got on the plane and she went home. The lighthouse at Taejongdi still stands. If you go to Busan and take the path up the cliffs, you can see it. Old stone, dark from sea wind, the light at the top working now, steady and clear. People take photographs of it. Tourists think it is romantic. Maybe it is. But if you stand very still at the base and put your hand against the north wall, the repaired north wall, the properly repaired one, you will notice that it sounds solid all the way through. No hollow spaces. Nothing hidden. Nothing waiting. Just a building standing in the wind, doing exactly what it was built to do. If you made it all the way to the end of this story, first of all, you are incredible and I appreciate you so much. This story took everything and I hope it gave you everything back. Please subscribe to this channel right now if you haven't already, because we tell stories like this all the time and you do not want to miss a single one. And leave me a comment. Tell me where you are watching from and tell me what you think Seon-oh deserved at the end. I genuinely want to know. See you in the next one.